find your in and out point, drag it down here, and it magically appears here. And then anything you do down here is going to show up here. So that's, every editor's like that. So like I say, if you learn Premiere, you'll be able to pretty much edit in any way, any kind of software pretty much. Any questions? One of the most important tools is the snapping tool. That's right there above in the timeline. It's right at the top left corner of the timeline. And it is, a lot of people don't know what it is, or they don't ignore it. They ignore it. But snapping tool is like a magnet, and it will bring, if you get close to it, like if you have a clip right here in the timeline and you're moving your other clip, when you get close, it snaps. That's why it's called snapping. It's like a magnet. So the snapping tool, if you don't have the snapping tool on, I always know beginning editors because I look at their footage and they have like a couple of frame gap of black, and I know they didn't have the snapping tool on because they're moving their clip, wasting a lot of time trying to get their clips together, and they can't see it, and they wind up with black gaps. So if you have the snapping tool on, boom, it magically snaps together, and your life is wonderful. So the snapping tool is something very, very important. With this packet and with the PowerPoint and everything, if you guys just keep looking back at this, that will help a lot. Students have always told me that is one of the most valuable things they learn in my editing class, is the snapping tool. Sometimes you won't want to snap because you want to move something. The problem with the snapping tool is it's always going to snap when there's an edit somewhere. So if you wanted to move something, but you wanted to go a little beyond, a little above and beyond, it's going to want to snap. And so you take off snapping and you can slide it and put the clip anywhere you want it. So that's, but 99% of the time you're going to want the snapping tool on. I'm always turning them off and on real quick to mess around. Okay, often editors forget to turn off the zoom. Sometimes they'll zoom in or out and they forget, and they're suddenly your video looks weird and everything. Well, on both windows, the program and the source, there's right here, just make sure that always says fit. So after you've zoomed in and you don't know what's wrong, or you can't remember how to zoom out or something, just go right there and click fit, and it, boom, it puts the video back where it should. Okay? Obviously, this just telling you this stuff isn't going to help until you actually do it. But you know, if you look at the paper I handed out and the PDF, you should be able to. This stuff will come quicker. Sometimes you only want audio or video of a clip to drop into the timeline. So if you find your in and out point, but you don't want any of the audio from this clip, all you do is you grab that. That's the movie. And you drag it and drop it in the timeline, and no audio goes down. And vice versa, right here's the audio. So if you only wanted a little clip and you wanted a little bit of dialogue or something, then you just drag that down, and that'll be your audio. Okay. This is a bunch of tools, and these are the most important tools right here. So if you're a mouse guy and you don't, or a mouse lady, and you don't want to learn shortcut for Razor Blade, it's visually right there next to the timeline, or right above that case, or right next to it. So Razor Blade is right there. It's a nice little picture. So there's a zoom, and that's your cursor. If you ever click your Razor Blade, you got to get back to your cursor. How do you get back to your cursor? Just click on that, and you get back to your cursor. That's one of the most important things you'll ever learn. Also, is if you don't remember that, you're going to be cutting everything without meaning to. Get in the habit of looking over at the VU meter. The VU meter is the audio meter, and make sure you're about your audio levels. Now for this, I want you guys to put some music in this. Just any music. I don't care what you put. You can find music that's appropriate for 1909. You know, it's kind of whatever silent movie music. Or you can put your favorite rap song. I don't care. Whatever. You put what you want. I don't care. But what you need, I just want you to throw some audio in there. And so now I jump back to this. So basically what you do is you go to import and bring in your music clip. In Premiere you can use MP3, you can use WAV, W-A-V, and you know, but you can't use what's that, M4A or whatever. There's an audio that is hard to play anywhere almost, and so you got to have an MP3 or a WAV pretty much. If you don't have that, you're going to have to go find something else. Do the same process as the video clip, and then drag the desired music down. By the way, this is your video tracks, and this is your audio tracks. So the audio tracks are green, and the video tracks are all blue and purplish or pinkish or whatever up here. So you don't put your audio track up here. I don't think it'll let you. Quite frankly, I don't remember ever doing that accidentally. So if you do bring your audio track up, I don't think it'll even work there. You got to drop it down there. Okay, and double click the music clip, and it will appear in the source window as a waveform, audio waveform. And basically, you find your, if you want to change the levels, you go up here to the top of the source box, and it says effects controls. Click on that, and your waveform disappears, and you got this, and it says level right there. You click on the little arrow, and you got a slider here, or you could do this. So there's different ways of changing the level. So just play with that for a few minutes. It's real easy. Okay, now back in the timeline. Get in the habit of sliding along the ruler up here. So if I want to go right here, you don't click here. Okay? That's going to be one of the biggest problems you have if you've never edited before. You're going to click there and nothing's happening. And you're going to get frustrated. Sometimes you'll double click, and basically that clip is going to go over into the source window, and it's going to confuse you. So don't go crazy trying to click here. You go here. Click up here to go anywhere on the timeline. Slide here, and you go through your movie. And right there is the point that I'm at. That is where I clicked. So if I click here, that's going to appear here. If I click here, that's going to appear. Does that make sense? It's pretty simple. Pretty simple, especially if you have something visual to help you look at. And just don't hit play and watch. If you hit play and watch, it's going to take you forever to edit. To fine-tune what you have placed on the timeline, you can use the razor blade to cut the video. You're not going to always find your exact, once you plop something on the timeline, it's never going to be necessarily the right length or the right thing you wanted. You've got to be able to move. By the way, in the timeline, you've got to get comfortable using the timeline. The timeline right there, if I decided this shot is in the wrong place, see all these are cuts right here. So this shot should be there. Well, what you do is click on that and drag it over and drop it there, and it'll move the other video away usually. So you've got to get kind of comfortable moving stuff around in the timeline. I could click on that and drag it and put it back here if I wanted to. I could click this and drag it on top, and then that clip would be over. But basically, whenever you put a clip up here, you can't see this anymore because this is on top. So it's like looking down. So I could grab that clip, put it there, and it would override that video. Yeah.
Is there a way to create a small label for the clips so that you know which one is which?
Yeah, you can name clips over in the in this over here.
Okay.
In the that whatever that window is, you can name clips anything you want. And that's when for this exercise. If I were you guys, there's only 3 clips pretty much, and I wouldn't worry about naming them. But for when you start doing more films and stuff, yeah, name things so you can find them easier. But yeah, it's like, but you can't name this necessarily something different. If that is the continuation of that, remember up in the source, you've got 3 clips. You're going to be cutting a lot of different things. You can't really change the name of that unless you double click it, I think, and then you go. I don't even do it. I'm real slob when it comes to editing. I just I'm throwing things around, I think, so I don't know too much about how you label stuff. But if you're really, if you're doing a lot, you really do need to be. I've never edited a huge thing since I did my film. So the razor blade is a good way to shorten stuff on the timeline, and you can click on that and drag it, and you put your cursor where you want, on the. So if you want to cut this shorter, you come here, up here, remember, and click here, where exactly, and then drag it where you want to do it, drag back and forth, hit play, whatever, stop. And when that line right there is right over here, then you get the razor blade in your mouse, and you come over here with your cursor is now a razor blade, and you go click, and it snaps to it because you got snapping on. If you don't have snapping on, you won't be able to go onto that line. But see, that's what I mean. Any line right here, you're going to snap to it, and you even snap to this too. So snapping is a very powerful tool. So you can go exactly the frame you want to cut, and then you click on it, and you made your razor blade cut, and then you click on that, and you delete it, or you right click, or there's like 3 or 4 different ways you can delete it. You just delete. You could sometimes, if I don't know if I want to delete it all the way, I'll cut it and then I'll drag it and drop it way after the movie is over, because I may want that later. Everybody does it differently. Okay. After you are done using the razor blade tool, make sure you click on the cursor button to return to normal. Otherwise, you're going to be cutting everything you click on. It's the arrow button or cursor. When done, you then might need to render. You guys shouldn't, but you might. By the way, if you need to render, usually, see this line right here? I don't know if it's here or above. See, this doesn't need to render, so I don't, but usually you'll have a line showing a green or a yellow line. Not green. Green means it's been rendered. It'll be red or orange or yellow, and that means it needs to be rendered. You guys shouldn't have to if the settings, if you set to DB and everything, but if you do, you go up to sequence and go to render, either in and out, or you go to render selection. Sometimes you have render all choice. I don't see anything like that there. You could render it. So now you're done with your video, and you want to export it. So what you do is you go up to File, go to Export Media. And then this window pops up, and now you go to Format, and you click. This is kind of hard to see, but anyway, if you have the paper, you can. You format H2. You got a drop-down thing right there, and you got about 100 choices. You got a lot more choices than you did 5 years ago. And you click on H.264. And then right under that, it says preset, and I say match source. I want it to be exactly what I've ingested. So remember, it's DV. This first project you're doing is standard def DV. So the way to know what you're doing, because you're going, well, how do I know what it is? Right here, it's a summary. So this is your output. It's at 720/480. That's standard def. And right below is the source, 720/480. So I know it was DV that I was editing, and it's outputting as DV. So I'm outputting the same thing. Yeah.
So it's, what do you put at HDV then? Like, do you put it just 1080 or?
Well, when you start your project, when that window pops up, you select HDV, and then basically when you bring it in. And one thing, usually when you first plop your video over here in the timeline, if you had it set to DV but it was actually high def, a window comes up and says you are choosing a different size or a different whatever the word.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll a lot of times tell you that your setting is something different than what you're setting. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes you'll put your DV. And that's one thing I always tell people: if you want to mix it, if you want to do a little DV and high def, you need to, whatever is going to be your main thing, you got to start with high def. So you plop in your high def footage, and then later you bring in some DV and plop it in, and it's going to say it's the wrong size, and you say you don't care, ignore. And so because you know that that's smaller, and you just want to put it up in the corner, I don't know, something. But yeah, that's tricky. That's tricky. That gets into tricky territory there when you're mixing. But basically, when you first bring it in, it shouldn't be a problem with high def. And you guys are going to be doing high def and 4K in this class. So you make sure right here. This is real critical. A lot of people ignore this or miss it. This is your output name. So you need to name it Daddy and Girls, and click on that. Notice it's blue. Whenever you see something blue like that, that usually means you can change something. So click on it, and what happens? Your hard drive pops up, and that's where you want it to go. Or the hard drive of the computer will pop up, and you need to go and find your hard drive. That's where you want your movie to go to. So this is one of the most critical things when you're exporting. If you don't look at that, it may go to the computer. It may default to the computer. So make sure you say you want it to go to your computer. I mean your hard drive. So click on that, the window opens up, and it goes to your hard drive. Send it to your hard drive. I told you already, this summary lets you know what the info about the output and the source is. You usually want these to match. This area is grayed out because I have already chosen match source. So, if you're changing it, you'll have choices down here. But if it's the same, you won't have any choice down there. By the way, here is when you're ready to export, go down and hit export. With H.264 selected at the top, you should wind up with an MP4 clip. Now, this is very important. Warning, these settings were done on Premiere using a PC. The settings will be a little different on a Mac. Adobe has tried to make them as similar as possible, but a lot of times when you start to output, it's going to give you maybe a little different choices. And so we'll find out. Next week when you come in and your video won't play or something, then we'll have to mess with it. But if you follow those, H.264, generally it should be an MP4. The thing about Macs is you have ProRes choices. You don't have ProRes. I couldn't find ProRes on mine, on PC. And last year and a half ago, Premiere made it so you could use ProRes on a PC. Before it was only usable for Mac, but I didn't see it in my choice, and maybe because it was a DV, maybe ProRes is only high def, so that might be why I didn't see it. Yeah.
Ultimately, when we finish these, do you want them in a specific file size?
Well, MP4. MP4. It should be. It'll be a DV. It'll be a DV size. So if you set it to MP4, it's going to be probably 260 megabytes or something like that for this project. So. No, what you need, you don't have a choice. You have right there. That's it. So once you select H.264 and match source, basically, you don't have many other choices at all. So you're trapped there. You can't make it bigger or smaller or anything. So now you could go if you said you've used Premiere before. If you want, you could go into technically right here when you go to export this window that pops up, you are technically leaving Premiere, and you are going into Encoder. Encoder is a way of changing video codecs and stuff like that. So basically, when you hit export, this window pops up, and you're kind of in Encoder now. And so when you choose your settings, then it exports. If it doesn't export correctly, you can open Encoder and change your whole settings and make them totally, you can make a very tiny thing. By the way, when you look at the drop-down menu, you have choices for YouTube, you have choices for Vimeo, you have choices for iTV, you have choice. I mean, that's what I mean by it. There's 50 choices right there. You don't want to choose any of that because this isn't YouTube or anything. And so I want a MP4 copy, so H.264 should work. So, but we'll find out next week. We'll see when you guys use a Mac and everything. Okay, so now that's that. Okay, now.